This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
The playoff series between the Wolves and the Mavs continues on because the Wolves finally held a fourth quarter lead and kept it for the entirety of last night's contest. So game number 5 coming tomorrow. We've also got a couple of key games in the NHL across tonight and tomorrow as well. We're going to break down all 3 of those games here today by talking to Tom Vecchio, getting his read on the markets for those specific games, where he sees value over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Tom Vecchio. Check out Tom on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. Find his work over at FanDuel Research. You can also check him out on the Solo Shot every Monday and Tuesday, talking MLB betting and DFS. Tom, welcome on into the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, we have some awesome games coming up over the next few days. These are like the high leverage, high excitement games that we really wait for all season. And we've specifically seen that in the Mavs and the Wolves series, where the first 3 games kind of could have gone either way. 2 great hockey games coming up over the next 2 days. I'm ready to roll.
So I know that overtime hockey is fun. Are you getting a little burned out? Because I feel like it's just like high stress, especially like with your Rangers being involved in it. It's like, we love overtime playoff hockey, but at what point do you reach a tipping point where you're like, I can't deal with this anymore?
Yeah, 3 straight games going overtime is tough. It's obviously much better when your team's not involved. I'll say that, where you just sit back and watch. As I've said before, it's more of just like an impending doom feeling rather than stress overall. But it's getting up there with 3 straight games.
Impending doom is something I can relate to. So believe me there, Minnesota sports fan, I got you on impending doom for sure. We'll start things off by talking hockey here first, and we'll dive in that Wolves and Mavs game later on. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Just search for Covering the Spread on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Click subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. The NBA Finals are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to use on same-game parlays, live bets, championship futures, and so much more. There is no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Not available in North Carolina. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, DC, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Vermont, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522 4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's begin things, Tom, by talking about tonight's NHL game. That is between the Oilers and the Stars. We're right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Oilers are -137 on the money line, with the Stars at +114. A lot of movement towards the Oilers since yesterday. Total in this game is 5.5, with the over at -124. So Stars, Tom, fell down early in Game 3. They were down 2-0 in the first period. They came back, though, to get the win and now lead 2-1 in this series. So when you look at Game 4 specifically, what stands out to you there?
This game has to be a more well-rounded effort from the Oilers. If anyone out there, they watched the most recent game, Game 3, the Oilers came out and they looked great in the first period. They're putting up goals. They're controlling the pace of play. And at a certain point, I don't want to say the effort wasn't there, but like the Stars just slowly took over and put together a better 40 minutes. So this is what we've seen from the Oilers throughout the regular season over the past few years, where they look great for these flashes, a half a game, but they have to put together a well-rounded 60-minute effort, essentially. So I think they need to come out strong again. So I do lean on the under on this game. I think the money line is fine. If it gets a little bit closer to even money, that's where I'll have just a touch more interest. If we can get it to, I don't know, maybe minus 120, whatever it is. I know that like you said, the Oilers have been gaining steam over the past day. If we see some extra money going towards the Stars and that changes it, around minus 120 is where I would go for the Oilers money line. Also leaning on the under. Now, when it comes to some shot props, the team totals are not listed yet. And under the shots, at least in the postseason, we've seen team total shots per period. So it'll say, will the Oilers record 8+ shots in the first period, 10+ shots in the first period? Those are posted. They're posted basically every day. They're just not posted right now. If we can get the Oilers for 10+ shots in the first period around minus 150, that is specifically where I'll be looking. Yesterday, the Panthers for 10+ shots in the first period were at minus 146. Their offenses are somewhat comparable. They were both home, or Panthers were home favorite. Oilers are home favorite. So I'm trying to build like some type of, I don't know what you call it, like narrative for this game where I'm expecting somewhat of the same situation where they come out strong, but they have to maintain that strength, not just throughout the first period, but moving forward from there. So Oilers 10+ shots in the first period if it's around minus 150.
And again, that market not currently up at FanDuel Sportsbook, but keep tabs on that because as Tom said, it has been going up throughout the playoffs thus far. What do you think is the reason for the fall off for the Oilers after that first period, and how can they sustain that throughout the second and third periods this time around?
Well, as I mentioned last week on the pod, I talked about the Oilers, like they always have this like Josh Allen moment where it's like we're just kind of waiting for something bad to happen. Ultimately, that does happen at times, especially with one of their defenders, can happen in goal for them. It ultimately comes down to the fact the Stars just have a more well-rounded team. They are just deeper top to bottom. And while the top-end talent for the Oilers is better with McDavid and Draisaitl and Zach Hyman, the rest of their lineup is just a little bit worse compared to every other player on the Stars. So while the Stars have no superstar, everyone else is just a little bit better, just a step ahead of everyone else on the Oilers lineup. So if they can neutralize McDavid and Draisaitl at times, every step of the way, the Stars are just going to be a better team. So it really comes down to getting a little bit more effort from everyone else, getting a little bit more production, being a little bit tighter on defense, and trying to eliminate some of those kind of weird mistakes that they tend to have.
Right. And we've seen the Stars do this before with facing other superstars, being able to limit them enough where they can win the series and look good so far. We'll see if they can do that again in game number 4 for tonight. So keep tabs on the money line. If Edmonton were to go back to around minus 120, Tom might have interest there. Interest in the under 5.5 at plus 102 right now. And then check back on that shot prop and see if you can get Edmonton over 10.5 shots in the first, or to get 10+ shots into the first period. If that's around minus 150 or so, Tom would see value there. Let's talk now about your Rangers, because we have got game number 5 coming up tomorrow night, where the Panthers are favored here, minus 115 in the money line. Rangers are at minus 104. Total for this game is at 5.5 at minus 128 on the under in this one. And markets are going crazy for this one right now. It's flipping constantly as we're discussing here. But the Panthers, even the series back up at 2 games apiece last night. So what stands out to you for game 5 specifically?
What stands out to me for game 5 is basically exactly what I anticipated, where we had this one high scoring game. I said that at the beginning of the series, like we're going to have one of these games that ends with like 7 or 8 goals, which is what we saw. And then it's all going to be falling back to the under, which is where we want to be going. We want to going to under 5.5 goals. I have no interest in going to the money line on either side. Obviously, we could be going to an Igor Shesterkin that saves prop, just because the Panthers, now that's not listed as of yet, but I expect it to be around 26 or 27. The Panthers have been dominating the pace of play. They are piling up the shot attempts. They are out shooting them in terms of shot attempts by 40 margin, a plus 50 margin over the past 2 games. We saw it specifically in the game 2 games ago when the Rangers won in overtime. They got out, the shot attempts were a 50 disadvantage for the Rangers. They still came away with the win. So an Igor saves prop, it's at 26 or 27.5. And then we got to look to a Rangers player for a saves shot prop. That would be Mika Zibanejad over 2.5 shots. Their top line center, it's sitting at minus 106. He's been solid over the past 2 games. He had 6 last night, 3, 2, 2 in the games this series. I don't want to say that the loss last night was solely on the shoulders of Mika Zibanejad because he had a bad turnover at the beginning of overtime, which led to another player on the Rangers being forced to take a penalty because he was out of position because of a bad pass by Zibanejad. We also saw Mika Zibanejad hit multiple posts. So he's firing the puck, and he hasn't scored in like 8 games at this point. So he's firing the puck a ton. Again, does he have to shoulder some of the blame for the loss last night? Maybe. They are at home, which means they get the preferred line change. So they could get him in better matchups away from Sasha Barkov on the other side from the Panthers, preventing him from going up against the best defensive center in the league. So he has to do a little bit more. He has to score. And then maybe throw in a little bit of the narrative. Like, yeah, he has to step up after kind of, I don't want to say blowing the game, but being a contributing factor for it.
Redemption arc for Mika Zibanejad for tomorrow night. That prop, again, at 2.5 shots over is -106 right now. And you've been talking a lot throughout this entire postseason about how the Rangers have been outshot by their opponents basically this entire time. So what's been the key to being able to overcome that? You know, is it just more effective shots? Is it luck? I don't know. Like, what's your explanation for why they've been able to make it this far despite the fact their opponents have consistently been out shooting them?
There's 2 reasons. And like you said, they've been outshot. I think it's in like 75 or 80% of the games. Like, they've only outshot the opponents in a handful of them. One, it's because in some of the games, especially versus the Canes, they had just better high danger chances. So the quality of shots were in favor of the Rangers in some of those matchups. And it really just comes down to Igor Shesterkin being absolutely elite. He's standing on his head. He's winning them games like single-handedly. Like, if he wasn't in net, it was just some, middle of the pack goaltender, like, they'd be giving up 5-6 goals a game.
Yeah.
So when you have a goalie that's running hot, it's just like, it doesn't matter how good the opposing team can be. It's like an ace pitcher in the postseason. Like, when he's out there, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. He can put up 8-9 strikeouts in 6 innings. It's just running hot with the best player at the best position or the most important position.
So Igor Bumgarner is what you're saying?
I mean, not bad. That's not a bad comparison.
We're going playoffs specifically. Regular season, not as much. But, playoffs specifically, you might go Igor Bumgarner. And with Zibanejad specifically, I want to talk about him quick because you mentioned he hasn't scored in a while. The shots have been there. And now you have last night as well. Like, it's hard to dissect the psychology of different players. But do you feel like he's the kind of guy who would still be aggressive despite having some disappointing results so far?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's not just only about the player, maybe from like a personal standpoint, but ultimately it's their role.
Yeah.
Right. He's on the first forward line. He's on the first power play, and he plays the Ovechkin spot essentially on the power play where he's on that off circle and he's one of their primary shooters. Mm-hmm. So regardless, even if he scored last night, he scored the game before, he's still a high volume shooter or someone who should be in a spot to be a high volume shooter.
Okay, so turning towards Mika Zibanejad, over 2.5 shots, -106 for tomorrow night's Panthers versus Rangers game. Also tomorrow is game number 5 between the Mavericks and the Timberwolves. The Wolves staving off elimination with their win last night. And now, Tom, favored by 4.5 in game number 5. Total for this one is a 209.5. We saw Anthony Edwards and Kat kind of come back to life last night. I thought that Edwards might be dealing with fatigue, given that he's like a younger guy and it's deep in the playoffs. Wasn't really sure we'd see him bounce back, but last night did look a lot better. So what's your view of game 5 after what we saw in last night's game?
I love the Mavs. I love the Mavs. I love the under. I think the Mavs close out the series here. And when we're looking at last night's game, the Timberwolves shot 46% from 3, right? Which I'm going to say is that's a great mark for any game of the year, whether it's October, December, whether it's in the middle of May. That's an extremely high clip against a very solid defense. They won by 5 points. So if they are the slightest bit less effective from downtown last night, the series is over. So when I'm looking at this, okay, they're running hot, and yes, a bounce back game, desperation, all these things. But if they are not that hot, we're going to see the Mavs, an extra stop here or there. They come away with that win. So if we're banking on 3-point regression, which we know can be super volatile. We've talked about it before. You've mentioned Dr. Ed Fang talks about 3 points a lot, all these things. Yes, they can run hot for another game, but if the Mavs tighten up on defense and the Timberwolves are just a little bit less effective, the Mavs can win this game by 3 or 4 points. So not only do I have the Mavs at +4.5, I want to say I have interest in going to an alt spread and taking the Mavs maybe -1.5, -2.5. If we get some of that negative regression for the Timberwolves kicking in, the Mavs can win this game straight up.
Okay, so the money line.
So the money line and the under 209. And then I'll have some unders on some players as well.
Is that a situation where, and this is personal preference, but is that a situation where you have interest in potentially a same game parlay because it revolves around the same assumption, where it's the same assumption of the Wolves 3-point shooting regresses. We don't see Cat hitting threes in the fourth quarter with hands in his face the entire time. That correlates with both the Mavericks money line and the total at 209.5. You parlay them together. That's a plus 348 at FanDuel Sportsbook, but they do revolve around the same assumption.
Right.
Is that enough to draw you in, or do you rather have those as individual bets?
I think it's a spot, and this comes down to personal preference, where you could have a smaller unit on the same game parlay because, again, we're looking for the correlation. So you decrease the risk, but you're still getting a piece of that. So that's probably the route that I would look to go.
Okay, so that is a consideration there. Potential same game parlay for Maz and Wolves with the Mavericks money line at plus 160, the under at 209.5. As Tom mentioned, some potential interest in the alt spread as well. If you want a bit slightly better number than what the money line is. Not finding the alternate spreads here right now, but regardless, you can check those out and see what those are at. Any player props stand out to you for this one, Tom?
That would be PJ Washington for the Mavs under 12.5 points. He's a player that I think he's just taking just a few too many field goal attempts. And at the end of the day, we've talked about it before, those shot attempts are going to be funneled to the best players. And then as Luka, that's Kyrie. He's been good. I think he's hitting a few too many shots from downtown. I think him consistently seeing double-digit field goal attempts every game is just a bit too high. Again, do role players struggle on the road at times? Yes, all these things are commonly held beliefs in the NBA when it comes to betting, especially in the playoffs. So if we're adding all these things together, I just don't see him being as effective on offense on a limited role or a role that should be decreasing, especially as the series goes on.
Yeah, that goes back to what we discussed with Dr. Ed Fang a couple weeks ago, where as the series goes along, you tend to see the stars get a higher usage rate. You tend to see scoring go down. Both those things working against PJ Washington in this market under 12.5 points, minus 120 at FanDuel Sportsbook for game number 5. That is Tom Vecchio. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. Find his work over at FanDuel Research, FanDuel.com/research. Check him out in the solo shot every Monday and Tuesday as well. Tom, appreciate the time as always. Good luck to you with the bets, and good luck to you sweating out some more overtime hockey, I assume tonight and tomorrow as well. Why not make it 5 in a row? We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty. Again, find Tom on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can also find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you all as well with your bets and enjoy all the games. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.